Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd ask unanimous consent that the prepared written statement of John Saylor, the deceased father, be placed in the record.
Without objection.
Ms. Lestrada, once again, our condolences. I had an opportunity also to be asked to pass on, again, a deep regret from Bob Baker, the elderly 50-year car dealer who simply was the unfortunate owner of the dealership that provided the loaner car to your daughter and son-in-law. There are many victims that we are dealing with in this tragedy, this group of tragedies, but none touches us in San Diego more closely than the loss of your family. We are here today, I think, trying to get to the bottom of an agency's failures. And Ms. Claybrook, I'm deeply concerned that the agency that you administered back in the 70s has become complacent. And I'd like to be fair to them, and I'd like to run just a line of questioning and then talk about some of the things that should be done to revitalize it. In 1975, a study was done just before you became the administrator that estimated that about 50% of all auto accidents were alcohol-related, 93% of all crashes were directly or indirectly related to the individual drivers, and approximately 13% were mechanical or vehicle-related. And in those days, as you and I recall, a lot of cars were driving without even automatic self-adjusting brakes, and most had drums, so no surprise that vehicles were more a part of it. And there were 51,000 deaths in 1980, the last year of your administration, and that was 3.35 per thousand. Now the good news. Today, about 1/3 of all fatalities are estimated to be alcohol-related. In 2008, there were 37,261 fatalities, even though our population has grown greatly, and that's about one per 1.27, I should say, per thousand, or yeah. So call it, and about 2% of automobile fatalities are estimated to be directly related to the vehicle failures, meaning we've gone from 13% where the car is at fault to 2%. Ms. Claybrook, I believe that probably a lot of what NHTSA is dealing with is the fact that cars are simply a lot better and less likely to fail, and what Mr. Ditlow has said is they're also harder to find those failures when they occur. You heard Secretary LaHood earlier today answering questions about transparency of the agency, looking around the world so that this problem or problems that had been detected and changed differently in Japan, detected and dealt with in Great Britain sooner than in this country, and had they been done, no doubt in my mind, your family would still be alive. Do you believe, first of all, that the Secretary is going to be able to make those changes within the budget and the present constraints, if you will, of the law? And if not, what we need to do to help him make those changes?
Thank you so much for your question, Mr. Issa. There's a lot of information in what you said.
Well, I don't want to mislead people. Cars are safer, but they're not as safe as obviously they could be if the agency you once shepherded was doing a better job.
And there are also different things. For example, there are 10,000 rollover deaths a year that virtually didn't exist when I was the administrator, because we didn't have SUVs and as many pickup trucks.
We had long gas lines then, too.
Well, I issued the toughest fuel economy standards you'll ever see, and Lee Iacocca can tell you that. Yes, there has been a reduction in deaths and injuries, and it's actually a little bit lower right now because of the recession. If you look at the economy and deaths on the highway, they sort of track each other. But I think that the vehicle safety standards that we have, particularly airbags and seat belts, now that are used by the vast majority of the public adults, have made a huge difference in the safety, and the campaigns that have been launched and the laws that have been passed on drunk driving have made a huge difference in that area, and those are big issues. I still think that there are a lot of issues that haven't been addressed in terms of safety standards, And then we have, in the defects area, for example, in the Ford Firestone case, there were over 200 deaths in that. I believe that the 34 or 39 deaths we know about now in the Toyota case is probably going to triple by the time all the information comes in, because a lot of people don't tell you that it happened. In terms of big changes, I think that the agency needs a lot more money. It has, I think, a meager budget for the work it's required to do, and as I said, I think it needs $100 million more. And I know that that's maybe pie in the sky, but I think that that ought to be the goal fairly soon. Secondly, the agency collects data in a very old-fashioned way. It collects data by doing acts investigations, SWAT teams, as Mr. Toyota said. But they were supposed to collect huge numbers of crash data, maybe 20,000 crashes a year. They're now only under the funding able to collect 4,000. The reason I focus so hard on the event data recorder, the black box, is because the black box could be not only the liberator of information about what happens in particular crashes, it could become the data source for the agency, and very inexpensively, because it's quite accurate, and so it should be mandatory. It should collect a lot more data, and that data should automatically go to the agency. And if it did, then they could take that $20 million they now spend on crash investigations and do analyses and fill in little gaps. So there's some very special things that this agency should do right now, and I believe that that my testimony also elaborates.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I would ask, just to be able to ask a question for the record very briefly. Secretary LaHood was, let's just say, not completely prepared to answer the questions related to, when we do a recall, how few actually in the ordinary course get implemented versus people get the letters, they don't see the significance, and they get lost. Would you answer for the record your view of, obviously then, now, and how we could change that?
Well, it's about 75%, 74%. That's the best. We never have 100%. The newer the car, the cheaper the fix, the more likely there is to be a recall, and the higher the returns are, except in examples like this, which are so unusual, where people are scared to death, so they bring the car in to get it fixed. The agency does get quarterly reports, quarterly reports for 6 quarters after a recall is announced, so it knows what the progress is of the company in getting these cars fixed. And it can extend that. It can also require the company to send out a second letter. It can also require them to do advertisements and other things like that to publicize it if it's particularly needed. I think that one of the key issues is how the letter is written to the consumer. And when I was administrator, I reviewed all those letters, and they had to say, alert, safety, you know? Now they're sort of smudged down, and so that they don't, as some people say, they don't scare the consumer. I want to scare the consumer. I want them to bring that car in and get it fixed. So, and it's also how the dealer reacts to it. Sometimes the dealers are underpaid. And when they're underpaid, then they make that the last thing that they do. Sometimes the manufacturers don't make the parts on time. So the letter goes out and you can't get your car fixed for 6 months or 4 months. And so people then don't do it. So there are a lot of factors, and I think that there was an investigation by the Inspector General of DOT in 2004. I would commend that to you to look at, in which he talked about this process, the early warning system, and getting the defects office activated. And I think that maybe another IG report on what NHTSA is doing and could do to enhance the repairs of these vehicles would be very worthwhile.
Thank you. It meant that for the record, but thank you.